Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we've got a pretty big topic to go over and discuss. This is the first thing I wanted to tackle after receiving the big news of the week, that being the November installation of the Intelligence Annex series for the Division 2's upcoming update, which they released very last minute, but it unveiled their plans to us for a brand new progression system coming to the game called the Expertise System. And as Splinter Shield put it quite well on Twitter, whereas Keener's Watch was kind of a long-term permanent progression for your agent, your character, the expertise system is very much going to be a long-term permanent progression outlet for your builds. It allows us to upgrade the power level of our weapons, brand gear, gear sets, exotic skills, and specialization weapons, so a lot of stuff. And just like the Keener Watch system, by the time you fully max out the system's power on all your favorite builds and setups, you're going to have a notable increase to your damage, survivability, and healing output. They didn't disclose the cap on these bonuses in the article, but I expect something comparable or even greater than the Keener Watch value. So before I dive in any deeper, I will leave my link and recap to that article and the new system we're receiving in the upper corner right now, if you'd like to go and check that out. If this is the first you're hearing of it, then I highly advise going and listening to that one first and then coming back to this discussion, because today I want to discuss the elephant in the room that a lot of people are talking about after us receiving this news. That being, so where's the difficulty increase? Let me explain. There's a term in MMOs and RPG lights like the Division called power creep, which can refer to a variety of things, but in this case, think of it as the gradual increase of our power as a player as time goes on and more content is released. I'll put it into perspective. Remember when WONI first dropped, just how insanely difficult PvE content felt? Heroic was a nightmare to try and take on, and while this was tuned down over time, the basic explanation of why that was occurring was because everyone was starting with a clean slate, right? It's kind of like the difference between fighting hunters in survival versus the underground in the Division 1. The ones in survival feel so much more powerful and lethal because you're fighting them at a disadvantage with your makeshift build of whatever you've been able to find in the mode. Whereas when they were added to the underground, you had all the tricks at your disposal. When we first hit level 40 in the endgame of Warlords of New York in the Division 2, we had nothing. No fine-tuned builds, no great synergies, no passive buffs like the Keener Watch bonuses. Everything felt a lot harder. But guess what? As time has gone on, over the past 18 months or so since that point, the content feels so much more easier now, despite Massive not really tuning the specific damage and health values of the NPCs. Again, some exceptions with some stuff they did in like TU9 and TU10, but to my recollection, those were mostly AI-based stuff with how smart and accurate they were. Point being, the power creep occurred over time. We slowly began leveling our watches and gaining those extra stats. As the seasons went on, we were given access to new gear sets, brands, and exotics that made for some really powerful combinations. Think about this: the Coyote's Mask, the EMP Sticky Bomb, Adrenaline Rush, InSync, Eclipse Protocol, the Memento, the Shrapnel Trap, Bellstone Armory, the Scorpio, Empress International, the Waveform. Those are all examples, prime examples of exotics, skill variants, gear talents, weapon talents, and gear sets that right now in late 2021, those are all widely popular and sometimes meta options for both PvE and PvP content in the Division 2. And guess what? None of it was available when Warlords of New York launched. So not only have long-term progression systems like the Keener Watch thing influenced this power creep, but seasonally added items have as well. And we've gotten to the point right now where a lot of the player base can comfortably and relatively easily take on heroic content. Not everybody, I don't want to paint an inaccurate picture here, but a lot of the remaining players. And so whereas WONI was an actual expansion with a level increase and a fresh starting point for every player as far as progression and power was concerned, this coming update for the game is going to be retroactive in the sense that we're not having to start over. We're staying at level 40, we get to keep our builds and arsenals we've accumulated for over a year now, and as far as we know, that long-term progression we've already built up in the Keener Watch system is sticking around as well. So my point is, there has to be some sort of NPC difficulty buff coming with this update. That's if Massive cares about retaining any sort of actual challenge in the game, which I assume they do, because that power creep is only going to get worse if the difficulty were to stay the same, and then we gain access to even more power through the expertise system and continually releasing gear, talents, and exotics via the Year 4 seasons. And so because of that, the way you historically fix a power creep in any given game is you balance things out. You redistribute the power and shuffle things up on the other side, which in Division 2's case would mean increasing the difficulty, or in better terms, linearly scaling NPC strength in relation to how much more powerful our agents are going to be getting. Now, for the record, I don't know they're going to do this. They didn't communicate any such plans in the article, but I assume they will. And that's kind of the whole reason I wanted to make this video and hold the discussion, because if you remember back to year 1 of the Division 2, challenge was non-existent. Aside from like the raid, even the hardest difficulties of content were really easy. And then when Warlords came around, they made it very clear that they intended to bring a real challenge back to the game in the form of new NPC faction archetypes, in the form of rebalancing heroic, and by adding in legendary content. They were proud of those changes, and I, for one, was super happy to see it. It gets boring, in my opinion, when everything is super easy all the time. And so again, while there's been no word of it yet, I find it hard to believe that they would just abandon that accomplishment by adding in this expertise system without rebalancing things on the enemy side of the game. This update is unarguably going to be the largest change to the game we've seen since Warlords of New York, and so I think this is the time where they're finally going to nail that power creep back down into place and allow us to begin the progression and power journey all over again at a fresh starting point of difficulty in year 4. And so off of that assumption, I wanted to just lay things out what I imagine such an endeavor would look like and kind of gauge everyone's thoughts about it. And I mean, it's not that hard to explain. I've seen a lot of people suggesting that they'll add in a new legendary difficulty mode higher than legendary, and I don't really see that happening. And frankly, I don't think I'd really want it to. Instead, I hope that they just kind of readjust our current normal through legendary difficulties to be somewhat more challenging than they are right now. You know what I mean? Like 10 to 15% more difficult, and that way as we progress through this new expertise system, we'll get closer and closer and eventually reach the difficulty point that we're at right now, and in doing so, that'll just prevent things from getting too easy. And personally, I'd be all in favor of that happening. Plus, if they do end up adding more legendary difficulty missions, like it's been speculated for a long time with this update, new and interesting mechanics in those could be a cool way to increase the difficulty, to challenge some of the new feats capable with the expertise ranks without actually increasing the NPC's armor or damage values. Okay, everyone, and I think that just about does it. Just want to come on here and have a discussion about what some of the side effects of this new expertise system may end up being. I, for one, assume and hope that NPC difficulty will be looked at in correlation to the new power we will be gaining, as I was not a fan of Cakewalk Year 1, but that's not to say that anyone else or even the devs might feel that way. Regardless, they've got a lot of new stuff to juggle as far as balancing the game out with this new update, from this expertise system to the vast spec rework changes, more revamps to the endgame we've likely not heard about yet, how it's all going to work in PvE, PvP. It's a lot, undoubtedly. I'm really excited to see how it all comes together. Thankfully, we have a PTS schedule to iron out some of those outliers, because, there will be some. And so while I'm sure it's going to be an intensive few-week period when that's all getting tested out, I, for one, am very keen on seeing where we do end up at on the other side. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts about NPC and game difficulty in relation to this new expertise system. Do you agree that with my thinking that the devs will most likely address the power creep and maybe you side with that ideology of preserving the challenge, or do you want things to become easier overall? Whatever side you may be on, leave all of that down below. I'll be very curious to read through some of these debates. Coming up, I'm going to do another spin-off video from this article actually talking about the epilogue, where they let us in on what the December Intel Annex will focus on, because personally, I'm super excited to hear about what their season redesign is going to look like. So yeah, lots of thoughts there. Stay tuned for that. Additionally, we've got the December event coming up quite soon, presumably. So lots of exciting stuff, folks. Lots of stuff. I can't wait, and I'll be here to cover it all, so be sure you turn on those notifications, and that is going to do it for this one, though. Everybody, once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.